Welcome to This Explainer. Today, I am putting on my hat as your creative coach because we are going to diagnose a problem that literally almost every creator faces: hitting a wall. If you've ever felt completely stuck or paralyzed in your transdisciplinary journey, hey, you are in the exact right place. We're going to dive into the actual systems and structures that author your creative fate. So let's start with the big, frustrating question. Why does your creativity keep hitting a wall? You know the feeling, right? That sudden creative resistance, those mental cramps, or just finding yourself staring aggressively at a blinking cursor for hours. Well, you aren't alone. But the most crucial point I want you to take away today is this. The problem isn't a lack of talent. It's not a lack of drive. The real issue is that you are probably using a very linear approach to solve what is actually a deeply systemic issue. The core difference here is an absolute game changer. Linear thinking is basically just reacting to that immediate creative block. It's you trying to muscle through, white-knuckling it, willing yourself to work. Systems thinking, on the other hand, is about zooming out. It's taking a step back to diagnose and actually modify the root environment that caused the block in the very first place. We've got to shift away from just reacting to isolated symptoms and start proactively understanding the underlying structures. Okay, let's move into Section 1, the iceberg of blocks looking beneath the surface. To really get this, we're going to use the iceberg model. It's a fantastic tool to understand what's actually happening when you freeze up. So above the surface, you have the event. That's your writer's block today. It's the visible symptom. But as we look deeper, right beneath the waterline, we find patterns. Like, do you always abandon your projects halfway through? Deeper still is the structure. This could be a poor personal attention ecosystem. Maybe your phone notifications are constantly hijacking your focus. And at the very bottom, the dark, heavy foundation of the iceberg, those are your emotional and mental models. And those deep mental models, they are heavily influenced by the world around us. Think about this. As we mature, we undergo a conditioning process that suppresses our creativity. Society and formal education effectively domesticate us. They teach us to fear failure, fear criticism, and above all else, strive for consistency. We're taught to hunt for the one right, logical answer instead of just exploring. As your coach, I can tell you for sure, this domestication forms a massive, deeply ingrained mental block against your true innovation. Section 2, the rubber band conflict, and why pushing harder just fails. Our mental models shape our reality, and they completely define our creative limits. When you try to push past these deep emotional models linearly, by just forcing yourself to work harder, you trigger what systems thinker Peter Senge calls structural conflict. Picture this. You have a rubber band wrapped around your waist, and your creative vision is pulling you forward. But there's a second rubber band, and that one is anchored firmly to those underlying mental beliefs, feelings of powerlessness, unworthiness, or fear of criticism, and it is pulling you violently backward. So, what happens? The closer you get to actually achieving your vision, the tighter that second rubber band gets, and the harder those underlying mental models pull you back. You just end up exhausted, wondering why on earth you self-sabotage right before the finish line. To truly move forward, we have to change the underlying mental models themselves, instead of just endlessly fighting the rubber band. Let's look at Section 3, shifting to systems thinking and becoming the co-creator. To break this structural conflict and unleash your actual potential, you've got to adopt the mindset of a true systems thinker. So what does that look like? Well, a systems thinker sees the entire picture, not just the isolated event. They search for interdependencies everywhere. They deeply understand how their own mental models create their fates. And importantly, they hold the strain of paradox. That means they embrace cognitive pluralism. They can hold multiple, even conflicting perspectives at once, rather than trying to force a single, rigid, logical answer onto a complex problem. Now for Section 4, Mastering the AERTS Modules, a Systemic Journey. The AERTS progression covers 5 distinct stages: awareness, enlightenment, reason, talent, and specialty. Now, I want to be clear, these aren't just a random sequence of classes you check off a list to get a grade. They are a deeply deliberate, step-by-step systemic journey. They are specifically designed to take you from a struggling, blocked artist and transform you into a fully realized, transdisciplinary co-creator. Let's break exactly how that works down. It all kicks off with Module A, Awareness. Here is where you use systemic self-knowledge to overcome those surface-level creative cramps we talked about earlier. You start by identifying your specific neurocognitive traits. Then, you do metacognitive mapping in digital environments, which basically means you literally map out your own attention ecosystem to see how algorithms are competing for your focus. Finally, you complete the AI mirror exercise. You bounce your ideas off artificial intelligence to clearly define what is distinctly human in your creative impulses versus what is just pattern replication. You are essentially mapping your own iceberg. Once you've mapped yourself, you move to Module E, Enlightenment. Here, you expand your system's view outward. You'll explore virtual cultural spaces and immersive digital archives. You'll engage with decolonized digital humanities, looking at history entirely outside of traditional Western narratives. And you'll study algorithmic aesthetics to really understand how code itself creates beauty. The big aha moment here is realizing that art history isn't just a single Eurocentric timeline. It's a parallel pluriverse of creative intelligence. You start seeing the massive, interconnected web of global culture. Next up is Module R, Reason. And here, we ask the ultimate systemic question: for what planetary need? You see, you are no longer creating in a vacuum or just doing art for art's sake. In this module, you ask systemic questions by mapping your craft directly to UN Systemic Development Goals. You'll literally investigate the ethical supply chains of your creative tools, from the cobalt in your digital devices to the water used in textile dyeing. Provenance is no longer an afterthought here, folks. It becomes an ethical obligation. Then we reach Module T, Talent. The absolute crux of this is the triad model. This is where your systems thinking physically manifests into reality. It turns you into what we call a T-shaped creative. You merge a traditional primary craft, like painting, dance, or poetry, with a technology amplifier, like creative coding or AI workflows. And then you point that powerful combination toward a specific impact domain, like climate change or urban resilience. You effectively become a powerful node in a transdisciplinary network. Finally, we hit Module S, Specialty. This addresses the actual business of your creativity. Here, we take those linear, extractive business models, the ones where creators are constantly exploited, and we completely replace them with regenerative economics. You're going to learn about circular business models, shared ownership through platform DAOs, and how to measure your social return on investment. It's all about ensuring that your art provides a planetary and social return, not just a financial bottom line. And the whole shebang culminates in your Genesis project, the capstone. This is where you prove you've completely melted that iceberg. You don't just make an isolated piece of art. You co-author a sustainable solution alongside non-human intelligence, you address a highly specific community or ecological need, and you perform a fully transparent sustainability audit of your entire process. You are practically demonstrating that you understand the entire system your work lives within. This quote pretty much captures the entire philosophy we've been unpacking today. Adam was the first architect. Our students are the next. They are not solitary geniuses, but co-creators. By adopting systems thinking, you get to completely shed that tired, domesticated trope of the solitary, tortured genius fighting blocks in a lonely room. You become a co-architect. You collaborate with algorithms, with ecological systems, and with global communities. So, as you embark on this incredible transdisciplinary journey, you have to ask yourself a question. Are you going to keep snapping that rubber band over and over, just fighting the symptoms of your creative blocks? Or will you look beneath the iceberg and actually redesign the system that authors your future? The blueprint is right here. The only question left is, what will you co-create first? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.